Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. So we have a mad scientist with us here today, a mad scientist who works a lot in the laboratory, usually has a white coat on and there's steaming vials of something or other always around her because she's a chief scientist of a company called Culture Partners. And as a chief scientist of workplace culture at Culture Partners, I know you're in the lab a lot. But before we go there, I have to know a little bit about this chief scientist, wonderful lady I get to chat with today, Dr. Jessica Kriegel. You wrote a book that was a big hit in 2016 called Unfairly Labeled. What was it about? How did you come to write it?
Unfairly Labeled was about generational dynamics at work. And it was a result of my dissertation research when I did my doctoral degree. I was studying millennials and Gen Zers. I went into it with a thesis that every generation was different and we needed to understand how they were different in order to most effectively attract, retain, and recruit them. And it turns out I was dead wrong, that so many of what we think we know about each generation is really unconscious bias and stereotyping. And my research surprised me, and I thought everyone needs to know this. So I wrote the book without really an intention other than I just think this is information people need to have. And it was so perfectly timed because it was at the moment in our history when we were obsessed with millennials and everyone was talking about millennials and what to do about millennials. And my message was counter-cultural. It was saying, that's not a thing. Stop talking about that. And it was a bit refreshing for leaders who could see that perhaps we were going overboard on the millennial hysteria. So that was where I got my start. And that's actually how my keynote career started, was people wanting to hear me talk about this millennial fad. And so
you didn't do anything like bring data to the table, did you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was my differentiator, was the data that I brought. Let me give you some examples. Millennials are commonly known to be less loyal to their employers than older generations. And the Employee Benefits Research Institute measures tenure at companies based on age. And if you look at the data on its face value, it does look like that. 25 to 35-year-olds, their average tenure is 3 years at a company. 55 to 65-year-olds, their average tenure is 10 years at a company. So you look at that and you say, look, young people are less loyal. The interesting part about that is if you dig a little bit deeper, you identify that the Employee Benefits Research Institute has been doing that research for 60 years. And 60 years ago, the numbers were exactly the same. So that is a life stage issue, not a generational issue. The story we've come up with that they have ADD and they're entitled and therefore they don't stay, that's not the case. We're earlier in our career. We don't know what we want to do for a living. We're exploring our options. We find out another opportunity. We go for it. Later in our career, we're closer to retirement. We've got a pension. We've got, whatever it is. That's why. So digging beneath the surface level of the data was where I found these insights that, so much of the media hypes these catchphrase type headlines that get attention, but it's not actually truth.
I can't wait to have a subsequent conversation with you, because we just did research. We partnered with BCG to research millennials. I had no idea that was your early work, to research millennials and their attitudes about things as they now get set to inherit $13 trillion that's coming to them from the boomer generation, and their attitudes about philanthropy and about careers. It's just digging into the raw data that came in from the research project, and it's fascinating. So can't wait to share that with you when we get all of the data in. But we interviewed a lot of millennials and we surveyed tens of thousands of them, and the data is just, I think, going to be really revealing. So I can't wait for you to get your arms around that.
I can't wait either. That sounds fascinating.
But, we did it in partnership with Worth and Worth Media Group and BCG. And it's really important things, because that's the biggest wealth transfer we've ever seen. And it's going to have impacts. And if everyone's going in with those biases that you've unmasked, it's going to have them making decisions on incorrect data And it's nice to have someone like you who's dug into the data and time-stamped it and life-staged it and really came to the truth.
Yeah. Can you give us any sneak peeks into what you've seen in the early stages, or is it too premature?
Just this past weekend, I began to look at the raw data that was coming in, and two things that jumped out at me is one is there's a DEI was the buzzword 3 years ago, and now if you mention it, people are going to throw rocks at you. But millennials still have a much higher propensity to make buying and brand decisions based on those brands' behavior in areas that are important to them, like climate. So everyone says, oh, no, that doesn't matter anymore. It does, and it especially matters to millennials. And the other thing is the importance in their lives of philanthropy. Different than the boomer generation. It's much more a part of their everyday lives. They're very conscious of their role in helping organizations and making a difference in organizations. And they don't want to just give money. They want to get involved.
Wow. That's great. Well, I can relate. I'm a millennial. That all sounds about right.
Good. So after you wrote the book, what happened to you career-wise?
I got invited to speak at one big conference with a lot of the right people in the room. And from there, I guess I did well at that conference because I got so many invitations to speak at large organizations like Lockheed Martin and the Federal Reserve and Toyota. And that it trickled from there. So I leaned into my keynoting career and was asked to join a small tech startup, and things were kind of cooking well until I met Culture Partners, the firm that I work with now.
And then life came to an end for you? Come on.
Yeah, no, it was like rocket fuel, when the Culture Partners philosophy of thinking about how culture drive results was so well aligned with the way that I thought about things. And it was just the perfect match at the perfect time. And so I've been there now for 2 years, and it's been so, so wonderful.
So how do you break out your time? You're still in demand on the speaking circuit, I'm sure, and I've heard. Yeah. And so you can't possibly do all the invites that come your way. How do you decide which ones you're going to do? Which ones would be good for you, for Culture Partners, timing? What kind of filters do you use to make those decisions?
It's a very complex equation based on first come, first serve and my custody schedule with my daughter. If I can do it, then I'll do it. And if you come too late to the party, it is what it is. And so, travel is complicated when you're a single mom, but I have an ex-husband who's very generous with trading days. So we make it work. I'm not necessarily picking and choosing clients. It's just really availability, and whoever says we're interested is who I go and see.
How many in-person presentations might you do in a year?
Like 50-ish, I would say we're averaging 50. One a week, although, yeah.
Wow.
But what's interesting is, like this week, I don't have any. And then next week I have 3. So you can also see seasonal changes in, the conference circuit, so to speak. I do less in the summer, more in the fall and spring, none in December, so I get breaks. Yeah.
That's when they happen. They're clustered.
Yeah, totally.
Did the topics you're covering now, do they change based on your audience? Or the things that you emphasize one time versus another?
No, I stay pretty true to the Culture Partners bread and butter, what our expertise is, and then talking about research that I'm doing to keep it fresh, right? So we play in the area of driving a culture that gets results and accountability. Those are the 2 things that we are absolutely expert in. And so that's what I would say 90% of my keynotes are. I just did a TEDx, which is how to get people to give a beep. And that is now a new keynote that I've been starting to get asked about more often, because I think leaders are frustrated because they're feeling like their employees don't give a beep, and they're trying to figure out how to crack that code. So things evolve, but slowly in the keynote industry. It's fresh content for anyone who hasn't seen it before.
Speaking of fresh, this thought I have to share with you, I'm not going to surprise you, is fresh because yesterday we have a charity that my family started 10 years ago called Smile Farms. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. We have a middle brother, Kevin, who was born developmentally disabled. He lives in a group home nearby. He's doing well. And the founder of the agency that created the group homes that my brother lives in one of suggested to us 10 years ago that our brother would be doing a lot better if he was able to find work in the community.
Hmm.
And that makes sense. And he said, not only would your brother be doing better, but so many of the men and women I have here living in our group homes and our daycare programs, et cetera, all would be doing better if they could find work in the community. But I can't find jobs for them. So he had this idea, and we picked it up. He said, let's get together for dinner. I have this idea I want to share with you. And he said, this is my brother Chris and I. And he said, bring your checkbook, by the way. So that gave birth to Smile Farm. So we bought some property, we built greenhouses, and we created growing environments where we have 36 adults, one of them being our brother Kevin, who work there every day growing flowers and plants and now food stuff, because so many of our restaurant friends are interested in us growing things that they could and will use in their restaurants all the time, but it's hard for them to get it in the quality and the quantities that they need, things like microgreens. So 10 years ago, we started. Fast forward, we have 500 people who work in our different facilities. We have a dozen different campuses, all of which have an agricultural theme, but more and more we're doing other kinds of job training to work in hospitality in particular, because that's where the opportunities come to us from. So we have restaurateurs, famous restaurateurs like New York-based Tom Colicchio, who operates 4 or 5 of the best restaurants in New York City, is very generous about hiring our people. And he has one fellow he says is the world's greatest wine glass polisher. And we have another fellow who just graduated. He's now cooking on the line. So restaurant friends have been very good to us. I bring that back to flowers because at 800 Flowers, we were told that this generation that you're part of and expert on wasn't going to be that interested. They're only interested in themselves. And particularly, we heard that about Generation Z. And I'm here to tell you it's just not true. So we had
it's just not true.
We had a big golf outing to raise money for Smile Farms yesterday. And we had, I think it was 39 volunteers who took a day off from flowers to be at the event, to sell tickets, to get people around, to do all the volunteer jobs you needed at 2 different locations we ran it at. And they worked from early in the morning till late at night, and they had a blast. And it's great for me because I get to work alongside people and get to know them that might have taken me years to get to know them that well. But you work side by side with someone working hard, and they might only be with us a few months, and I get to spend time with them, know them. When I see them around the office now today, I know them now. And that doesn't happen. But so everyone said it's going to be difficult to do. It's not. They volunteer their time every way, every day. We're overwhelmed. We have to turn away volunteers. We can't handle them all. But it goes to the point that you made earlier with your research about unfairly labeled. These people are giving of themselves and want to make a difference and work very, very hard, not only here at Flowers, but in volunteering with their efforts and all the other charities that we get involved with trying to help out through Smile Farms and through 1-800-Flowers. So when you said fresh, that's very fresh because we're all a little tired today, but it's for really good reasons.
Well, the thread that I hear in everything that you just shared is usefulness. We want to be useful. It is in our human nature to have meaning in our lives, and that meaning comes from being productive towards something, right? And that to me looks like finding meaning in work, but it also looks like finding meaning in volunteering. It also looks like being useful. I mean, the time I called 1-800-Flowers was when my cousin had a bad day at work and she was in a bad mood. And I said, I'm going to do something to make her feel better, if only because that would have made me feel useful today, And there it was. And it blew her mind because it was wildly unexpected. And it made me feel like I was able to show her love in a time when she needed to. So I just think we're all looking for that. We're all looking for a way to create meaning,
My brother and I did not anticipate the really positive benefit that creating Smile Farms and growing it now these 10 years would have on our culture and our workplace or on our customers. But I hear it back all the time from people. A week doesn't go by that we don't meet somebody or get introduced to somebody that has a child with a disability that's aging out of the school program and desperate to say, what do I find for them to do? Because whether it's your millennials that you researched, Generation Z, any of us, work most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, is about a lot more than a paycheck.
Yep.
It's why we get up in the morning. It's our meaning. It's social. My brother Kevin loves to go to work because that's where everybody is. When he's not working, he's not as happy.
Yeah.
Because it's not as social or stimulating and changing environments that comes from getting up in the morning and going to some place where you're going to be with 35 other adults that you like and respect and want to be with.
Well, you brought up DEI earlier and how 3 years ago everyone was on it and now no one wants to go near it. And I just was doing some work with the NIH and they don't call it DEI, they call it DEIA. And the A stands for accessibility. And when you understand that DEI doesn't have to do with just one thing. I mean, now I think people hear DEI and they think affirmative action. There's this, but that's not it. We're talking about something so much bigger. And A is an example of bringing that more broadly. You're making work more accessible, and that's providing meaning in people's lives and it's bearing fruit. So, I mean, I wish more people would de-escalate the drama in that phrase and realize what we're trying to do is create meaning for people. And that's a good thing.
I was chatting with the fellow who's the CEO of Fortune magazine. He's just retiring from that position. But he told me that his sense is that all of those activities that got started under the DEI banner are continuing because businesses, small and large, he's mostly dealing with obviously the Fortune 500 kind of businesses, but businesses, small and large, realized that those programs were the right thing to do, regardless of whether or not you're measuring them or being graded on it. And once corporate America puts their arms around an idea, that's when real change happens. And I think those programs are continuing, but we're just not wearing it on our sleeve like we used to because the political winds have blown.
You're talking about Alan Murray, and I like him a lot. I've spoken with him before. The subtitle of his book, which is all about ESG programs like this, is Searching for the Soul of Business. And when I spoke to him, I said, so did you find it? Did you find the soul of business? And he's like, well, I guess it's debatable. I think there's people who are continuing with those programs that are committed to it because they always believed in it. I do think there's also companies who are dropping it entirely because they were just doing it for performative reasons. And now they've got an out, and that's sad. But I think they're going to find out what happens with their culture when they create an environment that isn't inclusive and doesn't make people feel like they belong. It's going to long-term be bad for business.
2 years ago, you made a career decision to team up with Culture Partners. Tell us about that firm. Where does it come from? What are its roots?
Culture Partners was founded by Tom Smith and Roger Connors 35-ish years ago. They wrote a book called The Oz Principle, which was a New York Times bestseller and still is selling off the shelves today. I mean, it's one of those timeless books that doesn't go out of style, that is about creating personal and organizational accountability. And I think this business was built on the back of the success of that book and those concepts. They redefined accountability. When most people think about accountability, they think about who's to blame here? Who's at fault? Who is going to answer for this
Whose
mistake?
neck is it?
Yeah, who can I fire for this mistake, right? And what they said was that no, accountability is a personal choice to focus on what you can control and take the steps necessary to drive key results. And when you reframe it that way, you realize that you can create your own sense of empowerment by focusing on what you can control and making that choice rather than waiting for someone to grant you responsibility or grant you empowerment, which is this imaginary idea that isn't going to come from anywhere other than from within. So they have impacted every single industry. They've worked with government, with Fortune 10 companies, large and small. For 35 years now, we've been in business. And now Joe Terry is the CEO of Culture Partners, and he's taken it into its next chapter, which is, modernizing the organization, still using the same great frameworks that Tom Smith and Roger Connors invented, but really taking the business model into its next iteration and into the future for the long-term success of what we're doing.
Well, 2 years ago when you joined Culture Partners, we were still dealing with COVID. I guess we'll always be dealing with COVID, but we were in the thick of it then.
Yeah.
How does COVID change our workplaces? And there's so many obvious ways, but how do you think about the impact of COVID, how it impacts Culture Partners and what they teach and what they educate us all on?
I think that COVID had some small silver linings to it. And one of them was a reframing or a perspective analysis that everyone got to go through about the meaning and importance of work in their lives, the balance of work, and making intentional decisions about how and where we wanted to spend our time. That thoughtfulness changed the course of many people's lives. I mean, I know it changed mine, it changed my boyfriend, it changed so many people that I know made life-changing decisions because of that very traumatic moment in our history. And, from a business perspective, I'll tell you, Culture Partners struggled because we at that time weren't necessarily super prepared for virtual delivery, but got prepared pretty quickly. And we saw the balance of our business happen virtually for a while. We're now noticing everyone is back to being in person, and the virtual requests have gone down. But I think it taught us that culture happens in the one-on-one interactions that we have with each other, and it doesn't need to happen in the four walls of your workplace. So if culture is the way you think and act to get results, which is what we think culture is, the way you think and act to get results, well, I'm thinking and acting when I'm working from home as well as when I'm working in person. I mean, you and I are having an experience right now interacting and building a relationship, and we're on opposite coasts, so it can happen. It takes more intentionality, more thoughtfulness, a little bit more effort, but culture doesn't just disappear because we're virtual. And I think that's one of the things we learned and we're helping our clients figure out too.
Well, we would not be having this conversation if it wasn't for COVID. It caused the boom in Zoom. And just attitudinally, you wouldn't think that it would work and that it'd be watchable. Look, CNBC, they had guests because they wanted to have them in studio. And now most of their guests are not in studio. And maybe it didn't change things. Maybe it just accelerated a trend that would have happened. But I think there'll be studies of things that have changed by COVID for a very long time.
I think so too. I mean, when I did CNBC, I was doing it from this seat right here in my house, and I still got yelled at by the anchors, and it was very scary. But it was entertaining television, I'm sure.
Hi, I'm Jim McCann.
And I'm George Everly Jr.
During the COVID-19 epidemic, I stumbled upon an article that Dr. George wrote, which had a real strong impact on me in terms of how COVID was and was likely to impact our social connections, our relationships. And it really, really resonated with me. So I reached out to George, basically wrote him a fan letter, and that began our relationship.
We found a mutual interest in helping people become their best selves, especially in times of adversity.
Together, we embarked on a quest to co-write Lodestar. That journey began with countless hours of researching the most impactful self-help books out there.
Once we had our picks, we combined the science with the practical.
The result of our journey, the creation of a one-stop shop for the best of the best in self-help.
We decided to write this book to help others go from where they are to where they want to be and be the best possible selves they could be.
So if you're looking to boost your career, build stronger relationships, or simply become the best version of yourself, Lodestar is here to guide you on your path. How many people work in Culture Partners?
Internally, we have, 50-ish, 55-ish.
It's a pretty good size shop. Now, we got to work with a couple of your guys, Joe and Harald, worked with our company back last fall. And I would tell you, I wasn't expecting a great deal from them, but I would tell you, I was very positively impressed by the work they did with our leadership at an offsite that we do every year. And this year, Joe and Harald were there and worked with us, and they made a big impact on our company. In particular on me, leading up to that meeting and the conversations we've had about what they wanted us to do to be prepared to make that day as powerful and impactful as it could be, and in fact was. So I become a believer.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that.
And they've done some good work with us. Tell us, is there a nature of a client that you, as a firm, have worked with that you're particularly proud of? Some kind of work that you've done with somebody that comes to mind?
One of our biggest verticals, one of the industries that we get a lot of business in is healthcare industry. And that means a lot to me because I think the impact of the work that they're doing, the stress that they're under, the challenges that they're experiencing right now, given the nature of the healthcare system, anything that we can do to help them help people makes me feel really good about what we're doing. And, I believe that the work we're doing does affect health. I mean, I think of times in my past when I've worked in a toxic environment, which I have, and it was not just bad for my mental health, but, the stress creates less opportunity to go for a walk outside. And, I was not as good of a mother because of that. And when you create an environment where people are uplifted, they want to show up at work, they're happy, they're engaging socially with their peers, it just makes everything, the ripple effects in your life are so profound that everything gets easier. And so I like to think that we're making an impact on people's lives, in a similar, if not as direct way as the healthcare industry does.
Talk about, you said a toxic environment you worked in. What do you mean? Describe what toxic was to you in that situation.
I was working for someone that was unethical and making, decisions that were not only bad for business, but arguably illegal decisions. And I was aware of those decisions and then being gaslit when I was saying we shouldn't be doing that. And I mean, it was very toxic. It was pretty bad as it gets. And, lies, deception, gossip. Gossip is a killer in culture. And, my philosophy is if the person isn't in the room, I don't want to hear it. Bring them in the room and then we'll have the conversation. It's so easy to fall into the gossip trap. And there was so much of that it weighed on me, it weighed on me and I had to get out of there as quickly as I could.
Are there clients that you work with that you just think they're not going to get it? It's maybe not the best use of our time.
No, absolutely not. I would never admit to that, even if there was. But what's interesting?
And name names here. Come on, Doc.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, no, I mean, I would say that interestingly, not many of our clients come in with a super toxic culture because I think those people don't value culture.
Self-select.
And so
yep.
they're not our clients. Most people are actually pretty great cultures and they just want to become exceptional, or they have exceptional cultures and they now have huge new goals that are transformative in nature and they need to transform the way that people think and act in order to achieve those goals. And they know that culture is the way to go about doing that. So we actually get the privilege of not working with a bunch of broken cultures because they're not calling us. If they cared about culture, they wouldn't have such broken cultures, right?
I'm guessing that there are CEOs that you've worked with in more than one company. So they got to know you and your team. They've had you in, do some work for them, with them. And then 5 years later at a new shop, they're CEO of a new place. And are they calling you back then?
Yeah, that's actually our largest source of leads is people who've had a previous experience with us and have now moved to a new company. And they walk in and say, oh, these people are missing the mark. Because what we're expert in is helping you create intentional ways of thinking and acting to get results. And so often people think of culture as something touchy-feely. They think it's ping pong tables. Maybe we're going to have kombucha on Fridays and that's going to somehow drive results. Or, we think it's a leadership retreat. We're going to get everyone together in Napa. We're going to spend $50,000, send them on hot air balloons. We're going to do our Myers-Briggs and that's going to something culture, and those things are great. And I'm not against retreats. I think retreats are really powerful tools to build relationships, but it doesn't necessarily move the needle on the way that people think and act at work. And so that's what we're very intentional about, creating simple frameworks for people to be able to shift their culture according to the needs of the organization at the time. We're always having to change. The competitive landscape changes, M&A activity, technological evolution, new leadership, new structure, whatever. All of that requires new ways of thinking, shifting the ways we think. And if you don't figure out how to shift thinking, then you've got misaligned culture and accidental culture that's going to run you rather than you running it.
Excuse me 1 second. Jacqueline, cancel the hot balloon rides. Thank you.
They're fun, but I don't know that it's going to help you with driving results.
You guys have a phrase that I've heard all of your partners use, which is purpose plus strategy equals culture and results.
Yes, purpose plus strategy powered by culture equals results. That is the culture equation. Yeah. And that is the key, alignment. In fact, we did research with Stanford last year where we looked at 243 companies, big companies like McDonald's and, large organizations. And we looked at their purpose, we looked at their strategy, at their culture, at their revenue growth. And we looked at companies that were aligned on those things and companies that were not aligned. And I would say most companies today are not aligned, right? Because you've got the purpose, which was written by the founders many years ago. You've got the strategy, which is created in a boardroom with just the executive team. And then you've got culture, which is delegated to HR, and results, which people may or may not be aware of. And that's misalignment. And then there's companies who connect the dots, who say, this is why we exist. This is what we want to achieve. This is how we're going to go about doing it. And this is what we're driving towards. And when you have that alignment, the companies that were aligned actually 4x'd revenue growth over the course of 3 years compared to companies that were misaligned that only had 10% growth. 10% growth is still growth, right? You can have misalignment of your key components of your culture, your purpose, your strategy, and you'll grow. But if you want that really transformative, game-changing, have Fortune write a book about it kind of growth, you need to have that alignment. And so that's what we help clients do.
Let me take you off topic for a second, but I think it's related. A friend of mine, a fellow I admire a great deal, is an associate professor at the Yale School of Management. His name is Jeff Sonnenfeld. And he and his team of merry bandits, who are all students of his up in the graduate program there. When the war broke out in Ukraine over 2 years ago now, he did a lot of research, reporting, and calling out companies who said they were going to leave Russia and not do business there because of their behavior. And he did the real research and exposed to the world who really did leave, who faked it and didn't really leave, and who weren't leaving at all. And he tracked over 1,000 Western companies who, at great financial stress and burden, decided the right thing to do was to not do business in Russia and walk away from that. And that had to have a great deal of impact on their team members, their vendors, their stakeholders, when companies would leave so much in assets on the table to do the right thing. How does doing the right thing in situations like that impact a culture? How do you measure it? What cultural elements give that leadership the backbone to make those hard decisions because it's the right thing to do?
That's such a good question. And I don't think it's off topic. I mean, you have an experience company. You help people create experiences for people in their lives. We do too. We believe that experiences are the foundation of culture and everything that drives results. And so when I work for a company and the leadership makes a decision or not, that's an experience I'm having as an employee or as a consumer, right? And that experience is going to lead me to a belief. When someone receives flowers, that experience leads them to the belief that I'm loved. Someone sees me. Someone wants me to feel better. Someone wants me to feel loved, right? That is a super powerful belief to hold. And so when I have an experience...
And it's a bit of an exposure too. You're taking a chance as the gifter to express yourself.
Yeah, totally. And so when I'm an employee and I have an experience that my leadership team made a decision or didn't make a decision, both of those are experiences that will lead to beliefs. And the belief is either these people get it and they care, or these people are greedy profit mongers and they don't care and they're just going to do whatever makes money. And that's going to lead me to take an action. And as you saw in your research, there are people today who feel like if I'm not aligned from an ethical standpoint, a value standpoint with my company or with this company that I might purchase something from, then I'm going to opt out because it doesn't make me feel good. And that's the action that will lead you to a result, which is the sales or the retention of your talent or not. And I think that what's different now than ever before is that information is now multi-directional. 40 years ago,
Meaning?
Information went one way from the top to the bottom, right? Now you've got social media. People are going on TikTok and exposing bad management. I'm subscribed to the anti-work subreddit because it's fascinating to see people publishing text messages they're receiving from their manager about how they're being treated. And now you're seeing the innards of companies that you never saw before, thanks to, the internet. Somebody
clandestinely recording their exit interview.
Exactly. And that makes headlines. Then CNN is like, can you believe the CEO, how they talked to the team right before they got laid off or whatever? And it ruins the reputation of the CEO. What that means is this transparency is going to require companies to walk the walk a lot more than ever before. And your example of this person checked out who was faking it and who was really doing it. Those that were faking it, they're probably in a world of hurt for a short period of time. But I think people who make those kind of decisions make those kind of decisions consistently. And so they're going to get found out and they are going to suffer. Their business results will suffer because of it. In the short term, they may not. In the short term, they're probably going to do well. But in the long term, no way.
29 companies either sued or threatened to sue Professor Sonnenfeld and his team. Again, all but one are volunteers, students, and not one of them followed through.
Of course. They don't want the press. Yeah, that's amazing.
They found out that the press was kind of brutal.
I've got to find this research. I'm fascinated now to know.
I'll send you a link to it, but they keep an ongoing track on this, and it's really, really interesting stuff.
Oh, that is interesting.
You get to do business all over the world. We tend to think because we're fortunate enough to have a big and healthy, robust market here in the North America, that everyone behaves like us in the world. But European companies, for example, got laughed at recently with some European business leaders when I was talking about how many days we're in the office, and they're looking at me like, we're 5 days in the office. Europe seems to have gotten over COVID a lot quicker, and they don't know what we're talking about here, about having a difficult time getting back into the office. How do you see differences around the country and around the world, and how countries think and behave, especially when it comes to culture?
It's profound. The differences are profound. And what's interesting is I've done a lot of research on the intersection of country culture and workplace culture, and in global organizations, which trumps which. Because you've got country culture overlaid with the corporate culture. And so which one is going to win in those situations? And I've had the privilege of doing work with, cultures that are completely unlike mine. So for example, last year I went to Saudi Arabia and I was speaking to one branch of the government that is working on completely reinventing itself. Vision 2030 is something that the royal family has put out as a goal, which is to diversify their portfolio in the way that Saudi Arabia makes money, but also to increase equality and women's rights in Saudi Arabia by 2030. They have all these mandates. And so now everyone has to kind of get in line accordingly. And what they've all decided is that culture is the only way this change is going to happen. This is a cultural issue, not a strategic issue. And ultimately what I found is that even though the types of changes that are necessary in each place, and the challenges maybe 5 days versus 3 days, vacation time, in office, out of office, whatever, they may be different. People are people at the end of the day. And the model is true for everyone, that you want to create intentional experiences that will lead to beliefs that will align with the actions you want people to take and therefore get you results. That doesn't change no matter where you are. My dad, interestingly, went on a motorcycle trip around the world for 12 years. He was a CEO of he was crazy. CEO of a successful business. Well, successful is a generous word. I mean, he was CEO of a business. We'll say that. Okay. Uh-huh. And he shut it down one day, bought a motorcycle with a sidecar. This was in 2005, and left on a road trip that lasted 12 years long. And he went to basically almost every country. And that was his biggest takeaway from the trip.
Wow.
Is people are people everywhere. And, there's no bad people or bad countries. There may be bad government. There may be bad border patrol, but at their core, it's all just people trying to do their best. We're all equally the same in our differentness and different in our sameness.
So did you go and visit him on different stops around the globe?
Yeah, that was the best part. Whenever there was a country he was going to that I thought, there's no scenario where I will ever visit that country other than right now when my dad's there, I would go. So I went to Colombia, and I went to Namibia, and I went to Kyrgyzstan, and there was another one. But yeah, I went to some very cool places with him. And
well, not only is he an adventurer, but so are you.
Yeah, well, I was a adventurer by, by proxy, I guess. I would just go for a week or two. But what was amazing about him, like when we went to Kyrgyzstan, India, that was the last place I went. When we went to Kyrgyzstan, though, he arrived there 2 weeks before me. And I land in Bishkek, which is the capital of Kyrgyzstan. And
I knew that.
Of course, as all your listeners did too. And a couple days after I landed was his 60th birthday, and he had 30 people show up for a party. And he had only been in the country for 2 weeks and did not know anyone before he arrived. And they brought presents. And I just looked around. I thought, how do you people know him? They're like, well, we met him at the store. We met him at the gas station. He was walking by. He had this energy about him that was pretty remarkable. So he was able to befriend people everywhere and across languages.
You said he had?
He had, yeah. He passed away. It's a crazy story, actually. He came back just to visit for 3 months when I got pregnant because he wanted to be there for the birth of his granddaughter. And
Sure.
So he was there, and he was just the best grandpa ever. And after a couple months, he said, okay, I'm going back on the road. And he flew back to France or Switzerland where he had left his bike. And when he landed at the airport, he said the first thought he thought when he came off the plane was, what am I doing here? And the thing that he had been searching for, some sort of fulfillment, the hole in his heart that needed to be filled. I don't know what he was searching for on the road, but that thing he had been searching for, he realized was home all along. And he wanted to come and be a grandpa in Sacramento, of all places, a place he had never lived before. So 2 weeks later, he flew back and he said, I'm done with my trip. I want to be here. I want to be a grandpa. Whatever I was looking for, I found it here. I don't think he could have found it at home without going on that trip first. You know, there's something kind of poetic about that.
There's such a moral story there and life story. When are you going to write the book?
I'm trying to make the movie right now. If you know anyone that wants to help me make a movie, please let me know, because I think I have 12 years of footage that's just waiting to get made into the movie of his story. Anyway, but I got to tell you the end of the story.
I do have somebody.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll talk about
follow up with you. A new friend.
He told us that he was going to stay with us, and a week later, he died of a heart attack. Can you believe it?
Oh, my goodness.
It's like I couldn't have written the ending in a more profound way. So here's the other part of the story. I'm going way off topic, but it's such a good story.
Yeah.
So I spiraled down because my dad was my everything, and we finally got him back after 12 years on the road. And then he died suddenly. And it was this like, well, thank goodness he was here with us. And it was really healing to know he wanted to be with us. And then he could have been in Mongolia when he had the heart attack, but he was home. And so, that was the story. But I started to spiral downward. I mean, I started to have midlife crisis. I just didn't know what was going on with my life. And things just got worse and worse. And then my husband left me and everything was going bad. And the morning that my husband left me, I decided I was going to go for a walk. But I hadn't gone on that walk since my dad died, because when my dad was in town, we went on that walk every day. And it was too emotional since he died to go back there. But, so I was like, I'll just go to the gym instead of go to the walk. Well, I get in my car and the car won't start. So I get on the bicycle. And the bike,
I get goosebumps here.
I know, it's going to get better. I get on the bike and the bike has a flat. So then I try and get on my husband's bike and his bike seat is broken. So I can't get out of the house. And so I'm like being forced to go for this walk. And I didn't believe in God. If I did believe in God, I would have thought God is telling you not to go. But because I didn't believe in God, I was just frustrated and like, what's going on with all this stuff? So I go for the walk. And when I was going for these walks with my dad every day, I didn't tell him what my daughter's name was going to be because I didn't want him to not like it. So he made up a name for her, which was Violetta. And he just said, when Violetta gets here, we would talk about parenting every day. So anyway, this day, years later, I go for this walk and I'm calling my best friend. I'm saying, I'm distraught. I can't believe what's going on. My husband just left me. I miss my dad. And he said, what would your dad say? And I said, he wouldn't say anything. He would just do something to let me know that everything is going to be okay. And at that second, I looked down at the ground and there was brand new graffiti there that had never been there before that said Violetta. And I fell to my knees and that was the moment I became a believer. I started believing in a higher power that second. And I said out loud, I will never question if there's God again. And that was it. And then it sent me on this journey of seeking. And now I'm in seminary, actually, trying to understand what that higher power is exactly, because I had never been to church before, so I didn't know anything about it. And so it felt like my dad's trip, which was his journey, he called it the timeless ride. At the end of that journey, he gave me through this sign my own timeless ride, which is my own journey that's not as adventurous and not as much motorcycle, but, profound nevertheless.
Well, we have the name of the movie and the name of the book.
I know.
The Timeless Ride.
That's it. We just need someone to, make it.
And how's Violetta doing today?
Violetta's name is actually Eleanor, and she's turning 7 in a couple days, and she is thriving. And she says she still remembers my dad, even though she was only a couple months old when he passed. She says she remembers him and that he visits her and that she's, he is her favorite grandparent. And so that connection remains strong. And, she had her first swim meet the other day, and I can't tell you what it's like to have a baby this size, and now it's a baby that size, and they're swimming and they're competing. It's so bizarre. How many kids do you have? 3,
but more importantly, 7 grandkids.
Oh my goodness. Is being a grandparent the best thing ever?
It is the best. And we're so lucky because they all live nearby. All 7 grandkids are nearby. And we were together recently on Mother's Day, late afternoon. They all came over to the house. We're busy during the day selling flowers and delivering flowers. But late in the afternoon, they come over for dinner, which is a tradition. And we usually get it catered so that my wife, who's the mother of them all, doesn't have to work on Mother's Day other than when she works in the flower shops. But my son said, no, Dad, I'll barbecue. So we'll come to your house, but I'll do all the barbecuing. So I went with my 15-year-old granddaughter, who's a beautiful girl, my oldest. Her name is Abigail. And I said, I have a picture in my office that I left with that day that's on my counter in my office. It's a picture of me holding her at, let's call it 7 months old, in our backyard. We have, at that time of year, the first couple of weeks of May, the dogwoods are in bloom, the azaleas underneath, the multicolored azaleas. We got purple, we got white, we got real bright pink. It's just a beautiful spot. Every morning I stop on the way down the stairs at the landing. I look out at that spot in those couple of few weeks when it's just absolutely perfect. And I said, I have this picture of you, Abigail, from 15 years ago, and I'd like to replicate it today. Well, we did one with her standing next to me, and the other one I wanted to replicate, and I had her in my arms. Well, not only am I getting weaker, but at 130 pounds, I was encouraging my daughter to take the picture quickly.
You got to put the side-by-side up. Have we seen the side-by-side?
I haven't done it yet, but we will. But she's a terrific young lady, and those 7 grandkids are great. But listening to the impact your dad, with only a few months overlap, and his memory, and you're talking about him, I'm sure, has had on your granddaughter. That's what we grandparents live for, is to make an impact on our grandkids and to be remembered and to have them think of things that came from our dialogue, our lessons, our example that help guide them through their lives. So you've touched on so many stories here. The next time we chat, I'd love to hear about your journey of faith and discovery as a result of the experiences. But I want to get my front row seat in the theater for when this movie comes out.
Yeah, well, I'll save you a seat.
I do have an introduction to make to you, someone I just met who would be perfect for this. But Jessica, Dr. Kriegel, you're fascinating, and I was particularly impressed with how you unpacked for us the difference in millennials and how we think about things, and how to think about the impact of COVID and how we should frame it and understand how the changes in our lives. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad, and we have to embrace change. I've learned so much from you today. I can't wait till we chat again. And when's your next book out besides The Timeless Ride?
Well, we're working on that right now, actually. Joe Terry, CEO of Culture Partners, and I are partnering on the next book, which is all about the culture equation and how to get people to care and how we can really impact lives at work. That is our goal at Culture Partners, is to unleash the power of culture to inspire people and organizations to reach their full potential. And we measure success based on the number of lives we've impacted. So we're trying to impact 5 million lives next year. And if we've done that, then we feel like we've taken the little sliver of the world that we can influence and made it better in some way.
And I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you will. I know what the partners at Culture Partners had in mind when they approached you a couple of years ago about joining forces. You must be some terrific addition. You probably impacted them a great deal already in this 2-year time frame, and more so going forward. And when the new book comes out, I'd love to chat with you about that. And I get the sense that whether you like it or not, you're going to become a regular of ours.
Good. I can't wait. This has been so much fun. I love your questions, and thank you for everything that you're doing in the world to make people have those special moments that matter,
We realized some time ago that we weren't in the flower business, we weren't in the gift food business, whether it's at our Harry and David or Cheryl's Cookies, that we're in the relationship business. And anything we can do, like exposing our community to you and your thinking and the way you approach things, to help them to have more and better relationships in their life. Sometimes it involves a gift purchase, but not always. But as long as we can have that impact and bring great information to them, then we're doing our jobs.
That's beautiful. I bet that inspires people to wake up every day and get really excited about driving results. That's the purpose magic.
Well, we didn't understand any of that until we met your people back in September. Now we know it all.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that we could help.
Well, thanks for being generous with your time today. You're fascinating and fun, and I think we all learned a lot from you today. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's no day like a birthday. It's a time to celebrate. Every year, every wish that brought you to this point. Wrapped in birthday love, toasting a future as bright as the moment before you. The best gift is each other.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.